This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm delighted to be joined by Adam Smith over Zoom. Adam, first and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Recovered from a long week in the bubble and the drama, as always, of a box office event, but not a lot of time to rest up because we go again. You know, it's just such a busy last 4 or 5 weeks of the year. Obviously, you know, we've got the lockdown issues coming in on Thursday. Fortunately, it seems like elite sport is fine. We can carry on, but there's a lot of guidelines. There's a lot of social restrictions, obviously. There's a lot of admin. There's a lot of operational stuff to think about. But, you know, I've been in constant contact with Sky and with Eddie, and, you know, we're pretty confident that, you know, hopefully without positive COVID tests, which, you know, that's why we do the testing. We want everyone to be, you know, healthy and the fighters to be safe and all the rest of it. So, you know, obviously we need those big fights to stand up. But if they do, I think, you know, not just us, but our friends over at BT and, you know, those all around the world and the DAZN shows in the States and PBC and Top Rank, there's huge amounts to go until, you know, just before Christmas. So, you know, with a bit of luck, we'll all be out of lockdown for, you know, just before Christmas, and everyone can enjoy it to the best of our, you know, what we can, how many people we can get around the sort of Christmas table, etc. But, you know, I think everybody wants this year done because it's been a really terrible year, really difficult year for so many. And, you know, and the NHS and everyone done such a fantastic job. And listen, we've just tried our best. You know, the promoters have all done well across the board. You know, Eddie, Frank over in the States, you know, Bob and Oscar and PBC and everybody, and obviously DAZN and BT and Sky and Channel 5, everyone trying their best. And, you know, I think we've got together and we've put a lot of really good cards out. And if those, you know, those big fights that we've got scheduled can stand up until December the 12th, then we're, you know, we're in for a really good ride, aren't we? And obviously it'll be a time when a lot of people are, you know, not feeling great at home and the long nights, and, you know, we can give them some great boxing to tune into, and they've got a really varied choice, haven't they, across the board.
Just as you mentioned at the beginning, obviously we're heading into a second lockdown, or second full lockdown, I should say. Just going into that, how much, if at all, do you feel it will impact kind of a boxing world?
I think that obviously the grassroots and the amateur side and the youth is very difficult. You know, I think I've been to a couple of you know, amateur clubs over the last sort of few months, and just to sort of see them and look, it's really difficult. You know, obviously there was a time after lockdown they got a few kids back and they got a few, you know, fighters back in, but it's really hard. And, you know, for example, Anthony Joshua's training up at the EIS, and I think that, you know, it's almost like normally it's so busy and it's quiet, and, you know, it's really difficult. And I think that's the area that are going to obviously struggle the most, that we're going to have to really look into, you know, the grassroots side, the small promoters, the amateur side, and the kids as well. Because, you know, look, those of us who've got kids, I've got 2 teenagers and a 9-year-old, and, you know, to get them to tennis or get them to gymnastics or get them to football is, you know, it's part of their sort of, you know, their physical education. It's everything. And, you know, you want them to continue doing that as much as possible. But, you know, I took my daughter to football last night, and it might be the last time for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And that's tricky. And, you know, we've got to think of other things, and, you know, what is it, runs in the park or whatever. And I think that's really hard. And as far as boxing goes, obviously, you need, you know, you can train on your own, and obviously fighters do that, but then you do need, you know, sparring, or you do need a pad person or whatever. So, you know, you do need other people and trainers and coaches. So it's very difficult. It's going to be a hard time, but the most important thing is that people get through this period, you know, healthy. And I think that, you know, it's the end of the year, and I think that we don't know how long this lockdown will go, but if it does just go to early December, and, you know, at least we get a sort of bit of a festive period, I think it might get people back into a sort of slightly better frame of mind come the turn of 2021. But we know that, you know, wearing the masks and no crowds, or very few until, you know, who knows, spring, summer, it's going to be a real issue going forward. And people are going to, you know, feel very differently about going back into society. And without a vaccine yet, I think, you know, there's going to be more difficult times ahead. So I think, you know, that's the area of the sport that I feel most concerned about, or most sorry for. Obviously, if we get the the Tokyo Olympics, that'll be really good. But we need to get that side of things moving again as quickly as possible. But we're all dependent on what the government says, and ultimately we're being locked down from Thursday, and we're going to have to adhere to that. Elite sport goes on, so we can provide entertainment for the nation, the country, as best as we can. But it's difficult for all of us. Everyone's having to adapt. I've spoken to you before about, the difficulties of no crowd and how it affects everybody, not just the fans not being able to go there, but, we're, 12 meters back from ringside, calling fights from booths, socially distancing, you can't really get to talk to the various people around the arena. The bubble is great, because once you're in there and tested, you get better access than probably ever. So there's some ups and downs. There's a lot of learnings from this, but I think, we're doing the very best we can at our level. And I think that, I just feel sorry at the moment for the amateurs and for the kids and for all of those. And you look at the way women's boxing has just exploded. More and more girls and women want to get into boxing. My kids love Katie Taylor. They're inspired. And I think that, there's a lot of kids around there that will want to be getting into gyms. It's not just boxing, but doing other sports. And I think that's really hard. And, I know my boy loves playing golf, and, if you can't go and play golf in the open air, that's hard. But look, it's for a month, and we've got through it before, and we'll just have to get through it together, and everybody keeps as healthy and safe and secure as possible, and protects their elderly relatives, and as we have been trying to do this year. It's a very tough scenario.
You just raised one thing there, Adam, which I want to touch on. You mentioned obviously the growth of women's boxing. We've spoken about it plenty of times, but certainly over these past 7-8 months, when we've seen so many brilliant fights return to over on these shores or over in the States. But with regards to kind of the next generation of kind of female boxers coming through, it's a very good point you raised. If they can't get to the gym on the back of seeing the likes of Tasha Jonas, Terry Harper fight, or Rachel Ball, Shannon Courtenay, Katie Taylor versus Delphine Psunia, the list goes on. If on the back of seeing such brilliant fights that would make them want to go and take up the sport themselves, but they can't go and interact and actually do it, how much of a damaging kind of position do you think that will put people in?
Look, I think there's a whole load of things. I think first we have to say that the world is in a very damaged place, isn't it? Obviously, first of all, medically and from a health point of view, then it's the economics. We've got a huge election coming up stateside later on today. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world, and there's some very, very uncertain times. And I think, so there's a lot of bigger problems than our world. But obviously, we're all in boxing, so we want to try and look after our fighters. That's the most important thing. They're the ones that go in and put their livelihoods on the line and give us that entertainment. So they're the keys in all of this. I work for a business which obviously has boxing and sport, but it also has, mobile and broadband and news and ways of connecting people and cue boxes and entertainment. And you go wider still to Comcast. We've got Universal Studios that's making films. It's all really to entertain people and to keep them, up to date with the communication of Sky News, etc. So, hugely important parts of businesses. So, if you sort of put that at a higher level, boxing is a small, obviously, area, but, we obviously want, when we're getting a massive boom in women's boxing, we want that to inspire, and it does. Listen, I mean, in my household, it does. I've got two daughters, and they both came to watch Katie Taylor fight in Manchester. They're inspired by her. Whether they'll go on to be boxers, I don't think they will, but there's certainly they see her dedication and they see what can be achieved. The fact that there weren't really Jane Couch, a pioneer, and Amanda Coulson and others that, tried so hard for many years, but actually there wasn't the matches, there wasn't the belief, there wasn't the stage. Now there is the stage, the matches, the belief, the money starting to come, the recognition that there is an opportunity for women to do anything. And look, I'm very close to my mum, to my sister, and I'm very proud of women in business. And I think, there's some great women at Sky, and I think it's fantastic that, that's all really being pushed, the diversity. You see Anna presenting our shows. We've got Leanne Johnson on our team, who's absolutely superb, producer. And it's fantastic to see Sarah Chenery's directed for so long. Jenny Blackmore's been a wonderful production executive. We've had a fantastic set of PAs, Sarah Maria. We've had great women in business, which is fantastic for a huge amount of time. And I think that you know, Darren Barker's wife, Beth Taylor, who was my, you know, our admin sort of correspondent for so long, and just really got us through some really, you know, tough times, and really sort of pushed the sport hugely. She was brilliant. And I think that, you know, so we've had that. And I think now that, you know, the women's sports stars are coming through in cricket, in, you know, Imani, one of our scholars in athletics is flying, you know, we've got the swimming, we've got so many things, tennis. It's fantastic to see, you know, the women's sport just, you know, electrifying at the moment. And I think boxing's a massive part of that. I've got a women's working group later at Sky where Terry Harper's coming on to do a talk, and that's just fantastic. You know, they're great role models. So going back to your question of sort of how damaging is it, I think it's really bad timing, obviously. I think that, you know, if they could go into gym straight away, I think it would really inspire this last 2 or 3 months particularly. But hopefully, you know, maybe it's up to some of the women fighters, you know, the likes of Katie and Terry, to say, look, it doesn't matter that the gyms are shut at the moment, but this is what you can do, you know, at home. If you want to do the skipping, if you want to go for a run, if you want to watch, you know, tapes, boxing tapes, and maybe try and think of other ways that they can inspire the kids in these difficult times. Because, you know, we all, as parents, we all want our kids to have physical activity. So you just got to come up with different ways. You know, we know that you know, there's been different motivational ways, you know, of things during lockdown, and you know, you've got to come up with different things. So maybe that's a task for us. But more importantly, if the ladies are saying this, if Katie Taylor and Tasha Jonas and Terry Harper and Savannah Marshall and Chantel Cameron are going out, going, guys, you know, all the kids out there, all the sort of young would-be amateurs, you know, you can do this. And if you can't get to boxercise classes, or you can't get to, you know, fitness things, or you can't get to the gyms, you know, this is what you can do instead. And maybe that's an idea. They come up with a program, you know, they collaborate together. They get on great. Chantel and Savannah are best mates. You know, everyone loves Katie. You know, they all get on pretty well, don't they? They're all great women. They're great advocates. Why don't they sort of get together and, you know, rather you also get together at Christmas and do a record, do a music, do a CD, whatever. Why don't they maybe could get together and come up with an idea of a sort of, you know, a program for kids over the next couple of months. I think, you know, then they've got the Christmas holidays. I think that's an idea that may be worth mentioning. I might mention it to Terry today.
And one thing before we do kind of delve more into the action from this past weekend, once again, just going back to something you mentioned earlier, speaking about, you know, boxing without fans in attendance at this moment in time. I spoke to Callum Sowland yesterday, and he kind of had a sneaking suspicion we could see fans back for the AJ Pulev card on December 12th. Do you think that could be possible?
I don't know. I don't think so. I haven't spoken to Callie in a while, actually. I don't know whether, you know, look, are they going to keep it at the O2? Are we, you know, there's talk about possibly taking it abroad. I don't think so. I think AJ wants to fight here. I think the fight is about his sort of homecoming as well, as much as there's no fans. Look, he was there on Saturday night, you know, to get the experience, not just to support Dereck, but to get the experience of, yeah, and obviously to look at what Usyk could do, but to get the experience of what it's like. It's very, very different, Andy. You know, it's really eerie. It's a very different atmosphere. We miss the fans enormously. And that's not my sort of, you know, broadcasting stroke promotional head on, and that's what needs to, you know, the finances to make the fights. You know, look, we've got what we've got, and Eddie's got to do what he has to do, and Frank's got to do what he has to do to make it all work, or as best they can. I'm talking about the actual fans that deserve to be there at these big fights. You know, it's that we brought the sport back since London 2012, you know, with the Nights of Froch Groves, with AJ Klitschko, with these huge stadium shows, the big nights and big fights. You know, Britain became the envy of the world, didn't it? And I think that, you know, everybody sort of loves a big fight, and a lot of people are saying to me, I just wish we could be back there. And that's who I feel sorry for. I feel sorry for the fans, which is why when they can't come, we just want to just give them as much as we possibly can in the build up on the night to make them feel as though they are with us. But it's not the same. Of course it's not. And we don't like it either. But I don't know. I can't see after what Boris has just announced. I mean, okay, the lockdown is meant to finish on December 2nd. Could there be fans? I mean, listen, you can never say never. I'm sure that, you know, Eddie and the promotional outfits will be rallying the government as much as possible and saying, look, give it a feel-good thing, put them at a social distance. Yes, there are fans in other countries. Yes, they could be fans coming back into football stadiums at social distances. I know that they've almost sort of got rehearsals ready. They want to do it. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants it today, not in 6-9 months' time. We want it today. But we've got a government to adhere to, and we need to wait to see what they say. Look, at the moment, schools are open. My kids have gone back in today. It's fantastic. They get their education. They're not at home for another few weeks. Actually, it's great. They're back with their friends. That's good. The other good thing that came out of it is that elite sport carries on for the nation. Keeps us working, thankfully. Keeps the nation occupied, interested, entertained, and one step at a time. Look, we could find out next week that all elite sports off, and then we have to go back and these cards are cancelled. I don't think that will happen. There's no indication. The indication is will all go through till Christmas. It's a crucial 4 or 5 weeks. For me, the most important thing is that the big fights happen. Whether it's Dillian and Povetkin's rematch, whether it's Joe Joyce and Dubois, whether it's Fury, whether it's Joshua, whether it's Katie Taylor, whether it's Billy Joe and Martin Murray, these fights happen. And that we don't, unfortunately, like we have had fights lost to COVID positive tests, but that's why we test, so that the fighters, everybody's is secure and healthy, and that's absolutely the right thing to do. And they've been phenomenal matchroom with the operation. I've been so impressed with the bubbles, with the way it's worked, with the way that Sky and Matchroom have worked together on our operations. I'm sure it's exactly the same over at BT and with Frank, but it's absolutely brilliant what they've done. And the operations are huge, Andy, as you know. And to get them over the line is really. And then, I get Eddie on the phone, go, oh, we've got this problem, we've got this problem. And, normally we get problems in boxing, but we're getting all sorts of other problems. So it's really, really tricky. And, would I love to see crowds back for AJ Pulev? Of course I would. But I'd like to see 2, 3, 4, 5,000 at the O2. I'd love to see 20,000. I'd love to see, I wanted to see how many thousand Spurs fit, 60, 70, 80. What could we have got in there? But maybe we'll have to wait. Maybe that number won't be back for a number of months. Will their stadiums just be 5,000, 10,000, 20,000? I can't see, a sort of magic switch and people just saying, right, bang, we're back filling stadiums. I just can't see it. I think people are also going to be nervy about going. There'll be some people that say, of course, we want to get back into watch football, boxing, cricket, etc. But I think there's others, especially the elder generation, that are going to be thinking, oh, thank you very much. I'll watch it on the television now, or I'll stay away. I don't need to be there. So I think there's going to be it's going to take time. And I think that, look, if we can get some crowds back for AJ, brilliant. The way it looks to me, I wouldn't say that's going to happen, but maybe Calais knows something that I don't. I don't know. I hope he's right. I would be surprised if we did. I think we just got to concentrate on getting the fights, there, and get it out to the audience. If there is a gate and it helps both from finances and getting some lucky people back to ringside or to parts of the stadium, great, fantastic. I'd open the doors tomorrow if it was safe, Andy. It's obviously deemed not the right thing to do at the moment. We have had no indication from the government that that's what's going to happen. So we just have to wait and see what the next stage is. And I guess we probably won't know until early December, and we'll see then. It's not till mid-December the AJ Pulev fight. Maybe there's a bit of time, but I think it's unlikely.
Let's move forwards, Adam, and move on to this card from the past weekend. Dereck Chisora versus Alexander Usyk. Alexander Usyk with a unanimous decision victory. Just reflect on the fight for me, Adam. What do you make of Alexander's, what people have said is his first real test at heavyweight?
First of all, I thought it was a really good 12-round watch. I think most people felt Alexander Usyk would win fairly comfortably beforehand. Dereck was a big underdog. He said that he trained for a year on it. He trained with a different sort of setup, but, he didn't skip a session. He was in phenomenal shape. And you know what? Dereck Chisora did what it said on the tin. He said he'd go in there and bring the heat and eat the leather and take it to him. And he did it as best as he could from round 1 to round 12. Were there a couple of moments where he looked tired? Yep. Were there a couple of moments where you thought, could Alexander Usyk maybe, if he carried a bit more power, possibly have taken him out? Maybe. And the back end, I think probably Dereck suffered from that sort of second, third, fourth win, how exhausting must it have been to keep doing what he did? He's carrying a lot of weight, but he was in great shape, phenomenal shape. Hats off to the team. So he did everything he could have done in there. In our opinion, I think in most people's opinion, Alexander won it fairly clearly. I don't have any problem with the 5 points on one card and the 2 on the other 2. I don't think the margins. I heard some people scoring at 9-3 to Usyk. I heard some people 8-4. I don't really have a problem with the margins because I can see Dereck being rewarded, especially early on, and 1 or 2 maybe of the sort of mid to late rounds, and saying, I probably deserved that round. But you also have to score fights on punches, clean punches landed. And I think for me, a lot of Alexander's work, especially those sort of 3 to 8, were he was boxing really well. He was really mobile, and a lot of those quick shots that just sort of squeak through, and they're not the big power shots, but I thought he boxed really well at times. But then I thought Dereck's effort and work rate and willpower was phenomenal. So I can understand a little bit. I know David and Dereck and Dave Colwell and Tony Bellew and all of that probably thought either Dereck deserved it or it was a draw. It was really close. I think Eddie had it very close as well. You can sort of forgive that or see that because of the effort that Dereck put in round after round, and the fact that he was still there doing the same thing in the 12th round. I can understand them getting sort of carried away with that a bit, but it's not what we saw. We saw Alexander winning sort of clearly, not necessarily comfortably, because he had the heat on him pretty much all the way through. But I think in terms of boxing technique and the wizardry from the southpaw style and the hand speed, and I think that most people would score that a fairly comfortable win for Alexander. So okay, Alexander wins the fight. Dereck gets a moral victory. He went 12 rounds. He gave a great account of himself. He goes on. He can fight. We'd all see the third fight with Dillian, wouldn't we? Or Andy Ruiz, or a Joe Parker, or a winner of Dubois Joyce, or something. We'd all see that with Dereck. There's plenty ahead for Dereck if he wants it. I think he should have a well-earned rest. To be honest, he was brilliant in the build-up. He was fantastic, but Alexander Usyk quite rightly won the fight. Alexander Usyk remains unbeaten. Alexander Usyk remains a difficult night's work for anybody at any weight. Okay. Does it mean he can't beat, as people are saying, AJ and Fury, maybe even Wilder? Possibly they're too big for him. Possibly, but we don't know. Evander Holyfield went in there and shook Riddick Bowe to his boots at 14-9, but Holyfield was a different animal, and he had power, and so did David Haye when he came up. The fighters that come up successfully from cruiser heavyweight normally have a fair bit of pop in them as well. I'm not sure Usyk is that puncher, so he's probably going to have to go the full distance. I'd love to see him in with the likes of Andy Ruiz and the smaller heavyweights, maybe the Parkers, the Povetkins. I'd love to see him in with those guys. Maybe if the WBO doesn't sort itself out, he's the mandatory. Maybe they vacate if Joshua fights Fury and he fights a Dubois Joyce, or a Ruiz or type. That would be really interesting. Dubois might be too big for him, but you don't know. But he hasn't got that experience as a pro yet, really, Dubois. So all of those are interesting fights. But would I like to see him against Joshua? Yeah, I would. I would like to see him because I think he'd fancy he'd beat Joshua. But there's a reason why one was an Olympic heavyweight champion, one was an Olympic super heavyweight champion. So, normally the very good big guy beats the very good little guy, but not always. And that's the beauty of heavyweight boxing. Alexander Povetkin, weighed a lot less than Dillian Whyte. He knocked him cold. That's what can happen in heavyweight boxing, and upsets, are there for all to see. And, and if Dereck Chisora managed to land more on Usyk, what he did do was give him a huge test at heavyweight and ask questions. And a lot of people, I'm sure, sort of walked away thinking, I'm not sure Usyk can rule at heavyweight. I think he could still win a world heavyweight title, maybe if the right match comes along. Do I think he'd beat Joshua? He'd start an underdog, obviously, because of the size difference. But he's a clever fighter, and he'll have a tactical plan. And you'd be foolish to write him off, wouldn't you? I mean, he's never lost as a pro. He's been arguably the best cruiserweight ever. Him, Holyfield, Johnny. I mean, he's been brilliant. Now he's in the heavyweight division. Let's give him a chance. Let's go with it. He won the fight on Saturday. He did what was asked of him. He gave himself a 3 out of 10. I thought he was a little harsh on himself. Dereck tested him as we thought and hoped he would, and he did. And, the show goes on. He's still a very interesting part of the heavyweight division. He has to be seen as that.
Where do you think Dereck Chisora goes from here? We've obviously spoken about Alexander Usyk, and you still feel obviously he can compete at the top tier of a division. But with Dereck now, what do you think is next for him?
As I said, I think he needs a rest. I'm very fond of Dereck Chisora. He's a great guy. He's been through all sorts. He's entertained us for so many years. 13 years as a pro, and he's in a good place at the minute too. And I think that sort of weird at the beginning relationship with David Haye and that sort of friends, enemies, whatever they were, and suddenly now they've worked together. And I think David's got him into a great mindset. I think he's calm now. He's got a couple of young kids, and I think Dereck's in a really good place. And I think that he needs a rest. I think that he's been training a long time. He sparred with Povetkin earlier in the year. He's been training a long time for this fight. It was meant to happen in May. Doesn't happen to the end of October. I think, I'd like to see him take a real, relaxing few weeks now and then sort of have a think. But, with David Haye there's obviously a plan. They'll come back. And I don't think really a rematch with Usyk makes sense. I think what he should be thinking of is another great fight to entertain the fans. And I think we know what Dereck brings us. I mean, he can walk away now, and he's made some money. I'm sure there's lots of other things he wants to do in his life, but I don't think he want to. I think he felt he probably won the fight or was very close and gave a great account of himself, and is probably disappointed, dusting himself down. And you know what? He should have a rest and then decide what he wants to do. He'll be 37, I think, in December. So, it's up to him if he wants another couple of years at that. There's definitely enough matches out there for him. There's loads of heavyweights. And, as I said, the winner of Dubois Joyce and Andi Ruiz, Joe Parker, who's going to fight before, a third fight with Dillian White. If Dillian gets beaten by Povetkin again, everyone will say, well, that's it for Dillian White. No, he could have a third fight with Dereck Chisora. They gave us great entertainment before. I've never really looked too much into defeats. If you have defeats on your record, whatever. I think what's clear is that, it's going to be very difficult for someone like Dereck to win a world heavyweight title or something like that, unless it's a match for a vacant title against, a Dillian and Andi Ruiz, someone like that. But, could you see him going in and beating Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua or even Deontay Wilder? I think it's highly unlikely. So I think, he gave Usyk that real good test. And I think that there's still plenty of obviously ambition there. I think the good thing is that Dereck's happy and he's in a good place. And if he's in a good place and he wants to fight, why not? But he might just think, what, I've given absolutely everything this year, and I've made some money out of this, but there's always another fight, isn't there? And I think that's down to Dereck and David. And I think they've been clear. They'll dust themselves down and they'll come back and they'll plot the next path. And, with David, it's always fascinating. I love working with those guys, and they gave everything into the build-up and into the fight, and they deserve whatever lies ahead. Certainly another crack at something, but I'm sure we'll all watch those fights that I've mentioned.
Moving on to the rest of the card, Adam, we saw George Cambosos Jr. Overcome Lee Selby, once again going to cards. Just your thoughts on George's victory, and obviously we know that he's now the IBF mandatory, ready to face Teofimo Lopez. When that happens, we don't know, but do you feel he'd be ready to step up to a fight like that?
Listen, I was really impressed with George Cambosos and his team all week. I enjoyed being around them in the bubble. I hadn't spent time with him before. I'd known about him with Manny Pacquiao and the links there. I knew he'd sparred, at a high level, and he was obviously unbeaten. But, the Mickey Bay win was fine, but he needed really to prove himself, on the global stage against a quality fighter in Lee Selby. Now, Lee, obviously at featherweight, he was a different force. He's had a couple of fights at lightweight. He squeaked past Ricky Burns, another year off, 33. Difficult at a weight that probably, it's not natural. He was a lighter weight fighter, and, obviously he's got older. But, as he showed at times in the fight, there's still a lot of class there of Lee Selby. He just couldn't really sustain it. And I think you've got to take your hats off to George Cambosos. I believe that he'd come at him all guns blazing. He put all the pressure on him and try and, get to him, maybe try and stop him with body shots or something like that. But he actually, utilised his boxing ability. So I was really impressed with the way he stood off. Is he as good as Teofimo Lopez? No, not in my opinion. Does he deserve the opportunity of fighting? And of course, he's the mandatory fighter. Apparently, his dad was a great character. He was talking about the fact they've opened talks already to get into Oz next year, and maybe that's a place where crowds are going to be before others. So that's a possibility for Teofimo. We've seen big fights with Pacquiao out there. look, let's see what can happen. I think he's a breath of fresh air. He's a gladiator. With all the tattoos and the Greek Aussie heritage, and he's fought in Athens, and he's got a lot of fans, and I like him, and I like new blood. Teofimo Lopez has proved that he's that. He's a character. The backflips, the father, all of that. So is George. I love that fight. Whether there's a rematch with Lomachenko, whether there's a move up in weight, it's all up to Teofimo, isn't it? He's got huge amounts of options. Bob Arum will be looking at everything very carefully. But I tell you what, they've taken Pacquiao out there. If they fancy it in Oz, I don't see why that can't happen next year. So I wish George well. I thought he won the fight, as he did. I thought he won a fight comfortably. And, I feel sorry for Lee and his team. I'm very fond of Chris and Tony and everything they've done with Lee. And, it's a shame. And, is that the end of the league? Can he come again? That's something that the team have got to look at. And he's had a great career. And, he's been one of our best fighters of the last few years. And sure, there'll always be a fight out there. Was it a really damaging defeat? No, he just got beaten, and that's that. They've got to lick their wounds, and maybe Lee will come again, but maybe he'll just think, I can do other things now, and maybe he'll not want it. That's something that they'll have to think about in the coming days. But with George, yeah, great. Good new character, funny, new blood. And you saw that with Teofimo Lopez. We saw that, we knew about Gervonta Davis, and we've known about him for a while. Going back a bit, we've seen him on Sky for a number of years. But there's always been the question marks about his temperament, about his attitude, and he goes and does that to Leo Santa Cruz, who's one of my favourite fighters of recent years, both to work with and to watch. And I don't think anyone would have thought he'd be lying flat on his back after 6 rounds. I mean, that was astonishing. So listen, there's new blood in the sport, and there's new stories, and that's what it is. It's a cyclical sport. It always has been. And a bit of a changing of the guard seems to be coming in this year. And I thought George was great to work with, and I wish him and his team all the best. And I've never been to Australia, Andy. I don't know if you have, but I've always wanted to go. I've always wanted to go around January time to see the tennis and maybe watch the Ashes, and who knows, maybe we could get a big fight out there too. So I said to them, beforehand, if you win on Saturday, I said, save me a seat. I don't care if it's ringside or in the top tier, but if I'd love to go and see George. And they said, no worries, mate, we'll save you a couple. So listen, let's see what happens. But well done to him, and whatever Lee decides to do, he's had a phenomenal career, and I hope we see him again, whether it's in the ring or out of the ring. He's a terrific guy. He's been an absolute pleasure, and I don't think it's over for Lee yet. It depends whether he wants to carry on, and that's up to his team and him to sort of sit down and plot the next move. But I would welcome Lee back in a ring as always, and I'd welcome whatever he decides to do, because he's been a fantastic advocate for British and world boxing, and he's been a great world champion.
Just a final fight from the card to touch on, Adam, before we just move forwards once again. Savannah Marshall, somebody I know obviously you've worked with closely over the past few years. A brilliant performance from herself to overcome and stop Hannah Rankin. What did you make of it, and what kind of statement does that leave on the weights in and around hers?
She made a huge statement, and in many people's eyes, it was the performance of the night. And I thought it was an absolutely fantastic display from Savannah Marshall. This is with my very neutral head on here. I mean, obviously, as I said to her beforehand, Hannah Rankin, actually, we spent quite a lot of time together in the bubble. I think she's a terrific woman, fascinating, the whole sort of classical musical story, and the fact that she goes out and performs in front of orchestras and does Swan Lake, and got a degree, a master's at the Royal Academy of Music. She's some lady. She really is, Hannah, and she'll come again. And obviously, as I said to Savannah, once we put the mic up, we're totally neutral. We call the fight as we see it. But as you know, I go back a long way with Savannah Marshall. I mentored her at Sky for the Sky Scholarship Program, which lasted 4 years. I had her at a very difficult time. She froze at the Olympics. She was the world champion. She beat Clarissa, and she froze at the Olympics. And, we spent, along with Johnny and Spencer and my communications coach, friend Hugo Simpson, a lot of people, spent a lot of time working with Savannah and just trying to sort of, she obviously had the talent, the pedigree, but, there was something that was not quite right with her self-belief and her confidence. And what would happen, Andy, is that she'd go into amateur tournaments and she'd either sort of win them, she won the Commonwealth Games gold, or she'd do very well, she should have medaled in Rio, or she'd totally sort of not get past the first one where she should have done. And we couldn't quite work it out. But I think it took, a lot of time. I think it took a lot of maturity from Savannah. I think she'd admit it herself. I think, then she got the promotional call by Mayweather, which looked sort of strange on paper, but I think that gave her confidence that someone like Floyd Mayweather could see her talent. But then, it was weird. She took a professional debut on the Mayweather-McGregor bill. She won the fight, but, I remember her, and I think it was Sam Jones and others that were around her, and, they were also taken out the back door, and they couldn't, the wristband was cut. They couldn't stay at ringside for Mayweather-McGregor, and the harsh reality of what it was like to be a professional debutante sort of came home. She had this sort of weird time in Vegas. She came back, and Mick Hennessy took her and did a good job. And then I think the big connection was her and Peter Fury. And I think that once she got together with Peter, and she was so excited about that. And, I talked to Katie about her and to Brian, and, and how well that they'd sort of bonded. And, it's fantastic. And everyone then started to get interested with Savannah, because Peter and Savannah seem to have this great working relationship. And I think what Peter's done is, not only is he a fantastic sort of boxing tactician and trainer, but he's also a great mentor as well. So I think Peter's obviously the right fit for her. I think it was a terrific performance from Savannah. This is the Sky Mentor hat off. This is just, assessing it as a fighter. I thought she was terrific. I thought she was wonderfully poised. I think she looked confident in there, punches from different angles. And, to become the first person to stop Hannah Rankin when her arch rival Clarissa couldn't make it, with all that pressure on to perform. She knew she had to perform, unbeaten but untested. She knew about the amateur reputation, that she was brilliant. She always knew she was good enough. She felt the timing was right. It seemed like it was never going to come. In Newcastle, she was going to fight for the light heavyweight title. Then, this was delayed. It almost looked like, oh my God, is this ever going to come? Then she had Hannah Rankin, much more seasoned professional, sparred with Brackhouse, sparred with Clarissa, fought for a world title. Maybe not in terms of class was at the level of Savannah, but certainly in terms of professional experience, way, and the terms of 10-round fights. So, a lot of people thought it was a really tough ask on paper, and we wondered what would happen if Savannah, after 2 or 3 rounds, wasn't getting her own way, whether things would change. She was dominant, punch perfect, sparkling performance. Now there's something to really get excited about. Now we've got another British world champion. You've seen Terry Harper and Chantel Cameron, Katie Taylor doing it for Ireland. Fantastic times for women's boxing. Natasha Jonas arguably should have been world champion against Terry. Certainly is in that league. They're all there together. Savannah, fantastic. Come of age, 29. World's her oyster. Get her in the big fights. Clarissa Shields is obviously the one that we all want to see. Why can't that happen in 2021? 1 fight, 2 fights with Clarissa. It's different because she's at middleweight. Around the middleweight, super middleweight limit, you can see the power as well. And that's exciting too. So, yeah, very, very proud of Savannah from a personal point of view, but from a totally neutral point of view and calling a fight, I thought that was one of the best performances of the year. And I told Peter Fury that afterwards.
Moving forwards and away from this card, Adam, in the UK, over in America, we have something that you mentioned there. We obviously saw Gervonta Davis produce a stunning 6th-round stoppage victory over Leo Santa Cruz with that vicious uppercut to end the fight. What did you make of the fight up until that point, though, Adam? And a fight which people have been talking about on social media would be one between Teofimo Lopez and Gervonta Davis. One that I'm sure you'd be interested in, but one do you think we could see next year?
Listen, this is it, Andy. This is what Teofimo Lopez is the golden child, isn't he? He's the gold at the moment. I mean, what did Eddie keep saying with Lee Selby and Cambosos? It's the gold at the end of the rainbow. Well, obviously, everybody wants to fight Teofimo Lopez. He's the new hotshot. I'm sure Lomachenko will want a rematch unless he comes down in weight, which I think probably is preferable. But then, could he go up in weight? I'd like to see him stay around lightweight. There's the likes of Devin Haney, of course, who's got a big fight coming up. There's Ryan Garcia and Luke Campbell, which we can't wait for. There's so many great fights around that way. And as far as Gervonta Davis goes, we'd love to see that fight happen. There's so many. But, most people thought Gervonta Davis would probably find a way past Leo Santa Cruz. But to do it in the spectacular fashion that he did was just, and, it was such a shock that. And I just, listen, I like Gervonta. I've always liked him. They always, a bit like sort of Adrian Broner, when Broner sort of came to our attention, we thought, is he going to be as good? And he was saying, I'm the next Mayweather. And then Gervonta is sort of, there's only one Floyd Mayweather. Let's get that straight. Floyd Mayweather, the greatest fighter that I've seen, in a gym, in a ring since Sugar Ray Leonard. I stand by that. I think Joe Calzaghe over in Britain, but for me, Mayweather worldwide, no one can touch him. You know, Castillo got close. There was obviously a couple of tight fights, but look, De La Hoya as well. But, you know, what he did through the weights, Mayweather, a one-off. But Adrian Broner, a lot of talent. Gervonta Davis, you know, and also the same sort of characters, you know, getting a spot of bother, causes a few problems, controversial figures sometimes. Sort of sells, doesn't it? You know, Deontay Wilder's comments this week, you know, mind-boggling. But, you know, there's the bronze bomber garb, and he's the nicest fellow in the world when you meet him and chat to him. So, you know, sometimes they put this persona on, and I think Gervonta's been, you know, been looked at in the same way a bit. And in a way, I'm really pleased. I mean, Santa Cruz is a fantastic fighter, and he's you know, he's entertained us over the years, and, you know, he's been great. And I'm very surprised to have seen him sort of knocked out like that. But at the same time, you want new stars in the sport. You want, you know, people that can really bang, new characters, you know, almost sort of the good and bad narratives, all of those sort of things. So you can see all of this starting to come through. You know, you look Ryan Garcia and Campbell, and can you imagine Campbell as sort of, you know, the golden boy from the Olympics, and you know, you're sort of hardened Gervonta Davis, Teofimo Lopez and his dad. There's just so much to go on, isn't there? And we love narratives and we love stories. So yeah, I was thinking straight after that fight, Davis and Lopez. But you know, let's just one thing at a time. Listen, it was a great matchup, wasn't it? And a fantastic knockout win for Gervonta Davis.
Moving forward again, Adam, something you mentioned there, which I believe would have come out during your broadcast on Saturday night, the video with Deontay Wilder accusing Tyson Fury of tampering with his gloves. He said he was spiked with regards to some water that he drank beforehand. And he said that Mark Breland was disloyal. Just kind of your thoughts on all of that, and starting off with obviously the glove tampering.
I've just been watching your eyes, which have been rolling in your head when you were saying those sort of things, Andy. I think you just sort of said it all by that expression. Bizarre. But then the sort of excuses that came out after the fight with the costume, and I think there was a gloves thing there, was just strange as well. Listen, they've been really quiet, the team, for so long. Who knows what's actually gone on with the contracts, whether it ran out, whether they wanted the fight. I mean, everybody I've been talking to says Wilder's been training and ready for, you know, December fight with Fury. So, you know, I don't know. Is it going to end up contractually in the hands of lawyers? Is it, you know, going to move on? I think that the most important thing is that we want to see Deontay Wilder back in a ring at some point. That's the most important thing. I mean, from what I saw at ringside, Tyson Fury's performance against Deontay Wilder in the second fight was one of the greatest performances by a British boxer away from home I've ever seen. Okay, I was lucky enough to be there as well when Tyson Fury beat Vladimir Klitschko in Germany. And all the stuff we had all week with Vitali and on the day of the canvas and all that sort of stuff. And Tyson got through all of that. He got up off the 12th round in the first fight. I thought he won the first fight. I thought Tyson Fury deserved both. Obviously, he won the second fight, but I thought he deserved the first decision as well. You know, and obviously because Deontay Wilder knocked him down so spectacularly in the last round, you thought maybe Deontay Wilder would knock him out in the second fight. He's always got that chance of knocking anyone out because he's the biggest single puncher in years in the heavyweight division. And if they fought a third time, which we all sort of hope they would, then you've got to give Wilder a chance of doing that again, although Fury would have started big favourite. All the excuses just, I mean, it's a shame in many ways that you can't sort of sit there and give Tyson Fury credit, because that's what I did, and that's what I think the majority of the boxing public and world did. Tyson Fury was brilliant, outstanding. You know, Dillian White made a very good point this week, you know, and Dillian says some controversial things, of course, but he made a very good point. He said, did I blame anybody for the Povetkin defeat? No. I dusted myself down. I go again. My training team did a brilliant job with me before. It was my mistake. I made a mistake, and I'm going to right the wrong. Now, whether he should right the wrong, we'll find out in a couple of weeks, whether it's too soon, all those sort of question marks, or whether it was just a slip, mistake, whatever. He walked into a punch, thought he was in control after the 2 knockdowns. Who knows? We'll find all that out November 21st, which makes that absolutely fascinating. But if he loses again, I'm sure he'll sit and say, look, he's taken the responsibility of his own career on his shoulders. And I like that. Now, I know Deontay well. I've known him for many years. He's a great guy. I wish him happy birthday. I heard back from him. He's a lovely guy. He comes over to Britain. He's popular. He has friends in Sheffield. Does scuba diving, my friend Andy. He does scuba diving. He's great. He goes off. He's got a daughter with spina bifida who he's absolutely passionate about. He loves his kids, his family. He can do a lot of good things in the world. It's almost like 2 different people. Again, sometimes he said some bad things on the weeks of fights, about what he's going to do to his opponents. Does he really mean that? I don't believe it. I think it's almost like the bronze bomber garb. It's that sort of scary feel. It's that, even the costume on the night, Tyson comes in, wonderful performance, singing from the throne, and he comes in this, in the scary and heavy costume. But that's what he chooses to do. He chooses to have this sort of alter ego in a way, and I think that's what this is. I think this is, maybe it's just to provide controversy, to stir Fury back into a fight with him, to make the other heavyweights want to fight him. I don't know. Dillian says he'll never be in the ring again. I think he will. I think he'll fight again. I think he won't want to go out like that. But, does he have to fight? No, he's made a lot of money. He's been a great world champion. He's been great for the sport. He's got a lot of other interests, but I think he's such a character that we all want to see him fight again. Now, it may be that Fury and Joshua fight a couple of times next year, and Wilder fights an Andi Ruiz, or fights an Usyk, or fights a Dubois, or Joyce, or fights somebody else. Maybe he should have done that all along, rather than going back into the 3rd fight. Maybe he should take another fight. But he obviously wants Fury again. Well, that's what he's saying. So, look, I don't know. It's difficult. You always wonder why people have done this, why fighters sort of speak out like they do. There's obviously reasons, whether these are legalities that are going on behind the scenes, whether it's just he wants to annoy Tyson into saying, forget Joshua, I want to finish my business with Wilder first. I don't know. But I think it's disappointing that he can't accept, or that he won't go public, or any of them won't go public and say Tyson Fury, was brilliant that night, which he was. But they can't. It's their way of dealing with defeat. It's their way of dealing with it, or it's their people around this way, or it's to build the next narrative. You never quite know the truth. And until we talk to him off cam, we probably won't either.
Just moving forwards and on from that, sticking with Tyson Fury, though, Adam, he's lined up to face Usyk-Chisora. Frank Warren said I've ideally had contracts on probably by the end of today. I believe it is.
Yeah.
Don't know where things stand with that, but if that fight does go ahead, what do you make of it?
I think Carlos Takam was being sort of touted around first, but I had a good chat with Andy Lee at ringside the other night. He was there commentating for DAZN, and I think he thought it was going to be Fury-Kabayel, and I think that makes sense. He's an unbeaten fighter. Obviously, we saw what he did with Dereck in Monaco. Not too many people know much about him. I think it's a pretty good fight for Tyson Fury. I can't see him coming unstuck against Kabayel. He's not the biggest puncher. He is unbeaten. But, he's got talent. And look, I just want to see Tyson Fury back in a ring. I think I've spoken to him a few times during lockdown. I think that it's what he needs to happen. I think that Frank was very clear that if the Fury fight wasn't going to happen in America or whatever, he would fight again in the UK before the end of the year. That's what he's doing. I think it's important for him to do that. I think it's important for everything, his mental state, his physical state, everything about Tyson Fury. I think it's important that he doesn't have a year out of the ring. I think it's really good that he's getting back. I can't wait to see him back. But yeah, if it's Usyk-Chisora, it's a decent name on paper. It's okay. I think he'll win the fight. And I'll be tuning in. I can't wait. I'm really pleased that we haven't gone up against the Dubois Joyce fight on the 28th. We can sit back and watch that, and we should all be watching that because it's a great heavyweight fight. And then, the week after, we've got Billy Joe on the Friday night. Again, we didn't go up against it. We've got the Friday night. Then we can sit back and watch Tyson Fury, and then we can watch Garcia and Campbell. I mean, it's like, for all of us, even the ones that we don't have, we can sit back and watch. I know there's a lot of box office events on every side for the fans, and that's tough, at times like this. But at the same time, it gives them the option to get hold of as much boxing or as little boxing as they want. And I think you know, the dark nights, the difficult times now in lockdown. I think people are going to want to watch sport. You know, the Premier League goes on, the darts is coming back. There's loads of sport to get interested in. And I think boxing, you know, I sit on the Sky leadership calls, and they talk about all the other sports. So they talk about the other parts of the business, Andy, you know, the Sky Q and the entertainment and news and all the other stuff, the sort of, you know, essential parts of the business, which obviously to keep people informed with stuff. We've got a huge election tonight in America, Sky News all over it. You know, there's many other things of the Comcast world, but it's nice when you hear, oh, you know, boxing's got a great 5 weeks ahead of it. Fantastic. We can't wait. AJ's coming back. We've got the White Povetkin rematch. We've got the triple header of the women's boxing. We've got Billy Joe coming back. We've got a stellar sort of, you know, lineup. Would I like to have had some of the American fights? Of course. Did I stay up and watch Gervonta? You know, come on. You know, we want everything. We can't, but everything is being shown in some way, shape, or form. You can get hold of it. And listen, let's enjoy that. The fact that we've all got the ability to watch boxing. And again, I take my hat off to all the promoters around the world and the broadcasters who are getting on with it, who are making sure that boxing can. And most importantly, well done to the fighters who have got out of lockdown. They're putting on these great performances, win, lose, or draw. Do we think Sam Egginton had a great performance against Ted Cheeseman, didn't get the decision? Absolutely we did. Do we think that Tasha Jonas, you know, put everything against Terry Harper, got the draw, whatever? Brilliant. They both can go on from that. Do I think that Dereck Chisora put every effort he did in from round 1 to round 12? He said what he was going to do. Yes. Did he win the fight? No. Doesn't matter. He goes again. Do you know what? Hats off to all the fighters taking these opportunities, taking these risks to further their career, to get some money. And it's not, you know, maybe the money that they would have got with a big gate. Some of these big fighters, they're having to adapt. You know, going back to the Joe Gallagher stuff that he came out with the other day, which was very hurtful, you know, and he knows that. And we talked off record about that and had a long chat. And I've got a lot of time for Joe. I've known him for many, many years. And he's a great trainer and he's a great advocate for his fighters. But come on, do I want Callum Johnson on Sky? Of course I do. Do I want Callum Smith? Of course I do. Do I want Tasha Jones? Of course I do. But you can't, you know, we're not the promoters that make, you know, the matches. We're not involved in the money side. That's for managers, promoters, and fighters to deal with. That's for them to get to decisions. Do I want to see them on Sky? 100%. Do I want to see Callum against Canelo? Of course. That's the situation that's being decided at the moment, the Canelo situation. And unfortunately, a lot of those fighters have got to wait. But the fighters that are back, that have taken those opportunities, maybe for slightly less money or in a harder fight, or look at Kane Baker, ready, a couple of weeks, comes in, different levels, obviously, but you sort of got to take your opportunity. Savannah Marshall took her opportunity on Saturday night. Chantel Cameron took her opportunity. They've been waiting a long time for those chances. And, you know, it's Alexander Povetkin took his. So, you know, it's all there. It's out there. It's about how they adapt to the crowd, non-crowd, how they adapt to the tactics, how do they adapt to the bubbles, all different scenarios for all of us. And with the operation, the logistics and the difficulties of putting boxing on at the moment, I think what everybody's done, not just us and Eddie, not just Matchroom and Sky, although I think we did great with Fight Camp, Eddie's massive innovation. I think, you know, Frank and the whole team of Matchroom have been fantastic. I think what the Sky people have done behind the scenes has been amazing. I think the content's been brilliant over lockdown and post, but also on the other side with BT, with The Zone, with Americans, with Top Rank, with PBC, with Fox, with everything. I think all of us have done exceptionally well to make sure that boxing is carried on. You know, and I think that's taken, you know, chats with Todd DeBerth, that's taken chats with Frank Warren, that's taken chats with, you know, we're all talking. We're all in the same boat. Yes, we're rivals. Yes, there's a lot of, you know, financial problems to deal with on every side. But we are all trying our best to make sure the fighters can fight and the public can be entertained, even if it is at home. So it's a terrific period, you know, as they all say, get your popcorn, get your seat on the sofa, and unfortunately, while you can't be there, enjoy the next month. And let's hope as well that there's an opportunity for those young that are being inspired by what boxing's brought in the last few years, and especially what the women are bringing to us, you know, lately. Fantastic. Let's hope that the young can get inspired, and, you know, when they can't get to gyms at the moment and they're sharp, that they can get out and go for training runs, or they can skip in a garden, or however they can do it, they will be, they will want to be like their heroes. They're looking up to Katie. They're looking up to Terry and Tasha. They're looking up to these ladies now and thinking, I can do this. And even if it's not in boxing, even if it's in tennis, or if it's in athletics, or if it's in something, this is a massive inspiration to the young women out there, and showing that they can do it, and we've got obviously Anna, we've got a woman presenter, there's women commentators everywhere now, there's women in business. That's a massive boost as well. And I'm so pleased that now the women's boxing scene is so buoyant, and we're getting, aren't we, Andy, some of the great fights, some of the greatest fights we've had in the last 3 or 4 months have been from the women, and there's more to come. This triple header next week: Katie Taylor, Terry Harper defending their titles, Rachel Ball going for hers. We've got Shannon Courtney as well. We've got Ellie Scottley, looked fantastic on her pro debut. Ramla Ali looked brilliant. The poise that she had, a lot of nerves, a lot of sort of, was she going to fight? Was she not? Look at her, and look at her incredible story, And they, for one, I want to get my daughters involved in. They look up to Katie. I want them to really understand where these women have come from and what they can do. And it doesn't have to be in a boxing ring. It can be in anything. But it goes to show that if you put your mind to it and you dedicate yourself, you can get there if you've got the platform. And well done to everybody that's giving this the platform, because I think it's fantastic. And Andy, I'm going to have to leave you in a minute, because I've got to go on to a Sky working group where we've got Terry Harper, whose birthday was yesterday, coming on and and giving a little talk. We're doing a little interview together. Isn't that fantastic? It's absolutely brilliant. So we're looking forward to seeing Terry. Want Tasha back. I want to see Tasha and Terry in. I want to see Tasha and Katie. I want to see all of it. Can't have everything. Not all the sweets in the jar. We know that. But we're doing what we can. We're doing what we can best. As long as everyone stays healthy and we get through these next few weeks, and Boris doesn't, shut down elite sport. I don't think he will. I think he secretly likes a bit of sport, and he knows the nation can be buoyed by that. We'll do it as carefully and safely as we have been doing, and hopefully we get all these great fights over the line. We can sit back and watch Dubai Joyce, and then we can get there and commentate on our ones. And, we should all be happy. And I'm sure all the other fighters are watching. It's a lot of cross connection at the moment. And I think that's, that may change down the line. But I think it's really good that we're all getting in there together. And, and well done to Robert Smith and the board for making sure these fights go on, and making sure that, that they are the best in the world at keeping to the safety and health and medical precautions. And, we had the problem in a couple of weeks ago with Lewis Ritson, not the car with Vasquez. I think we've sort of moved on from that. But with the ambulances, we had 2 ambulances taken away because of precautionary things, and we had to wait for the ambulances to come back. We had a 45-minute gap before boxing started again. It wasn't an ideal time. Obviously, Pete, there was a viewing audience, but it was an absolutely necessary time to make sure that boxing couldn't go on without the absolute safety and health of the fighters. Absolutely is paramount and the only thing. And because they are getting in the ring at this time, at this difficult time. And remember, they may have had relatives who have had COVID. They may have had COVID themselves, like your Jazza Dickens, They may have gone through the difficulties. Anthony Yard, what he's gone through this year, thoughts and prayers, and hats off to him to even get back into a ring during this time. Boxers are incredible people, they're fantastic. They are so disciplined, so dedicated, and a lot of other sports should look at fighters and look at what they go through individually, and what they've had to deal with during this last year. And I think they're a shining example to all sport, and long may it continue.
Adam, we will leave that there now. I'll leave you to shoot off to take care of your call. I appreciate you giving up some time today, probably a lot longer than what either of us expected, but I appreciate you doing so. I will catch up with you soon ahead of what I believe next week. We'll see Katie Taylor return. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you, though, Adam, and thanks for Speed Boxing Social.
Cheers, Andy. Anytime.